The Medici family ruled Florence for centuries. They built incredible wealth and power. But their stunning country villas were more than just fancy homes. These grand buildings, tucked away in the Tuscan hills, saw more than just lavish parties. They witnessed dark secrets, forgotten scandals, and lives that ended too soon. Beneath their beautiful frescoes and grand gardens, whispers of conspiracy, ambition, and heartbreak still echo. Number 9. Villa di Cafaggiolo and the Fateful Hunt. Deep in the Mugello region, where ancient forests climb rugged hills, stands the Villa di Cafaggiolo. This castle-like villa was one of the very first country estates the Medici family ever owned. It was more than just a summer house. It was a symbol of their rising power, a place where they could escape the city's pressures and still feel like royalty. Giovanni di Medici, the founder of the family's banking dynasty, acquired it in the early 1400s. His son, Cosimo the Elder, later transformed it into a grand fortress villa, giving it those crenellated towers and strong walls you see today. It felt like a medieval stronghold, but inside it was filled with the kind of luxury that only the Medici could afford. The architect Michelozzo, who was a favorite of the family, worked on its design. He balanced the villa's defensive look with comfortable living spaces, making it both impressive and inviting. Cafaggiolo saw many famous Medici figures pass through its doors. Lorenzo the Magnificent, the most famous of all Medici rulers, spent parts of his childhood here. He roamed its grounds, learned to ride, and probably dreamed of the powerful future that awaited him. His grandmother, Cosimo's wife, Contessina di Bardi, loved this villa deeply. She oversaw its management and enjoyed the peace it offered. For generations, Cafaggiolo was a favorite retreat, a place where children could play freely and adults could relax away from the watchful eyes of Florentine society. They would go hunting in the surrounding forests, gather for lavish banquets, and enjoy the clean country air. It was a place of family gatherings, celebrations, and even some important political meetings held in secret. The villa's large kitchens would have been bustling with cooks preparing elaborate meals, and its halls would have echoed with music and laughter. But Cafaggiolo also holds a much darker story, a tale of a hunting trip that ended in tragedy and sparked a chain of events that rocked the Medici family. It happened in 1482. Two young cousins, both named Giovanni de' Medici, were staying at the villa. One, Giovanni, was the son of Pierfrancesco de' Medici, a distant but increasingly influential branch of the family. The other Giovanni was the son of Lorenzo the Magnificent, a cardinal who would later become Pope Leo X. These two young men were close, almost like brothers. They spent their days riding, hunting, and exploring the vast estate. One afternoon, they decided to go hunting in the woods near the villa. The hunt was supposed to be a fun, harmless pastime. They rode out with their hounds and a few attendants eager to track game through the dense Tuscan wilderness. During the hunt, something went terribly wrong. Accounts differ slightly on the exact details, but the outcome was undeniable. The son of Pierfrancesco de' Medici, young Giovanni, was killed. Some say it was an accident, a stray arrow, or a misfired shot. Others whispered that it was a more sinister event, perhaps a deliberate act disguised as an accident. The truth was never fully confirmed. What we do know is that the young man was brought back to Cafaggiolo's grand halls, lifeless. The villa, usually filled with joy, was plunged into a deep mourning. Lorenzo, the Magnificent himself, was devastated by the loss of his nephew and namesake. The event was a profound shock to the entire Medici family. It cast a long shadow over the supposedly idyllic villa. The death of young Giovanni was not just a personal tragedy, it had significant political implications. Pierfrancesco de' Medici, the grieving father, grew deeply suspicious. He believed his son's death was no accident. He suspected foul play, perhaps even a plot orchestrated by Lorenzo the Magnificent to eliminate a potential rival branch of the family. The suspicion drove a wedge between the two branches of the Medici family. Pierfrancesco became increasingly critical of Lorenzo's rule, his spending, and his overall direction for Florence. The tension grew so thick that Pierfrancesco eventually moved his family away from Florence, settling in Rome. This split within the family, sparked by the incident at Cafaggiolo, had lasting consequences. It contributed to the eventual downfall of the Medici rule years later, when the family was temporarily exiled from Florence. The echoes of that tragic hunting trip lingered at Cafaggiolo for decades. The villa, despite its continued use by the Medici, perhaps never fully shook off the memory of that fateful day. It reminded everyone that even in their grandest retreats, power struggles and dark fates could find them. Over the centuries, the villa changed hands many times, moving away from the Medici family. It eventually became the property of the state of Italy. Today it stands as a testament to both the grandeur and the hidden sorrows of one of history's most powerful families. Its stone walls hold the secrets of lavish parties, childhood games, and a tragic incident that forever altered the course of Medici history, a haunting reminder that even within paradise, danger can lurk. Number 8. Villa del Trebbio and the First Dark Secrets. Perched high on a hill overlooking the Siev Valley, the Villa del Trebbio stands like a watchful sentinel. This was another one of the earliest Medici properties, bought by Giovanni de' Medici in the early 1400s, even before Cafaggiolo. It feels more like a medieval fortress than a comfortable villa, with its tall, square tower, crenellated walls, and narrow windows. Michelozzo, the same architect who worked on Cafaggiolo, also helped transform this original castle into a more refined, yet still formidable, country estate for the Medici. Trebbio was meant to be a place of defense and a base for agricultural activities, showing the Medici's roots in farming and land ownership before they fully plunged into banking and politics. It had an enclosed garden, a courtyard, and even a chapel. Cosimo the Elder, Giovanni's son, spent a lot of time at Trebbio. He loved the quiet life it offered, away from the hustle and bustle of Florence. He enjoyed tending to his lands, overseeing the olive groves and vineyards that surrounded the villa. It was at Trebbio that Cosimo began to cultivate his famous gardens, blending practical agriculture with artistic beauty. He saw the land as a source of both wealth and philosophical inspiration. The villa was a place for intellectual discussions, quiet contemplation, and forging family bonds. It was rustic compared to later, more ornate Medici villas, but it held a special place in the family's heart as their original country home, a symbol of their humble beginnings and their eventual rise to power. But Trebbio, despite its seemingly peaceful exterior, was also a place where some of the Medici's earliest and darkest family secrets were forged. Cosimo the Elder had a reputation for being a wise and generally benevolent ruler, but his journey to power was not without ruthlessness. He faced numerous rivals in Florence, powerful families who resented the Medici's growing influence. One of the most significant threats came from the Albizzi family. In 1433, the Albizzi managed to have Cosimo arrested and exiled from Florence. He was imprisoned in the Palazzo Vecchio, and for a terrifying period, his life was in real danger. But Cosimo was cunning. He bribed his way out of prison and went into exile, first in Padua, then in Venice. When Cosimo returned to Florence in 1434, just 1 year later, his return marked a turning point. He came back stronger and more determined than ever. His enemies, particularly the Albizzi, were now on the defensive. It was during this period, in the aftermath of his exile and triumphant return, that some of the Medici's more brutal decisions were made. Trebbio, located far from the city's prying eyes, served as a secluded meeting place where Cosimo and his closest allies could discuss strategies, make plans, and sometimes decide the fate of their rivals. It was a place where political maneuvering and decisive actions, sometimes involving violence, were secretly plotted. One particularly grim story associated with Trebbio involves the fate of some of Cosimo's opponents. While direct evidence is scarce, historical whispers suggest that Cosimo, now firmly back in power, dealt with those who had conspired against him in a harsh manner. Some were exiled, their properties confiscated. Others, perhaps, met a more permanent end. Trebbio's isolated location made it an ideal spot for secret meetings, where these difficult decisions could be made without public scrutiny. The thick walls of the villa, designed for defense, could also conceal conversations and activities that the Medici wanted to keep hidden. And it was in these early years of Medici dominance, when their power was still consolidating, that they sometimes resorted to unforgiving methods to secure their position. Another secret linked to Trebbio involves family tensions. Cosimo had two sons, Piero the Goody and Giovanni. Giovanni was charismatic and intelligent, perhaps even more so than his brother Piero. Cosimo had high hopes for Giovanni, and at one point it seemed that Giovanni might be the one to inherit his father's vast empire and political power. However, Giovanni's health was frail. He suffered from various illnesses, and despite his intelligence, he was not as robust as his father had hoped. There were rumors and quiet discussions about Giovanni's potential to lead, and the pressure on him was immense. These family deliberations, the weighing of one son against another, the private anxieties about the future of the dynasty, often took place in the quiet solitude of villas like Trebbio. Giovanni eventually died young, preceding his father. This left Piero, who was often ill with gout, as the undisputed heir. The private struggles and hopes surrounding Giovanni, his potential, and his tragic early death played out behind the closed doors of places like Trebbio. The villa was not just a place for outward display of power, but also for the inward machinations of a family determined to secure its future, no matter the cost. These hidden decisions, the sometimes brutal acts required to maintain power, were part of the foundation upon which the Medici Empire was built. Trebbio, therefore, stands as a testament to the Medici's origins, their early struggles, and the sometimes dark means they employed to establish their dominion over Florence. Its ancient stones remember the first whispers of ambition and the stark reality of power in Renaissance Italy. Number 7. Villa di Careggi and the Philosopher's Last Breath. Nestled on the outskirts of Florence, the Villa di Careggi is unlike the fortress like early Medici villas. It feels softer, more elegant, reflecting a shift in Medici tastes and the flourishing of Renaissance humanism. Cosimo the Elder acquired this villa in the mid-1400s and again called upon Michelozzo to transform it. This time, the design emphasized comfort, light, and a connection to nature. Careggi became famous for its gardens, which were meticulously designed and filled with exotic plants and classical statues. It was a place where art, philosophy, and nature converged, a perfect setting for the intellectual pursuits that the Medici so enthusiastically supported. And Careggi was the spiritual and intellectual heart of the Medici family for generations. Cosimo the Elder, after suffering his own political turmoil, found solace and inspiration here. He established the famous Platonic Academy at Careggi. This was not a formal school with classrooms, but rather a gathering of brilliant minds. Philosophers, scholars, artists, and poets would meet at the villa, often in its beautiful loggias or serene gardens. They would discuss the works of Plato, ancient Greek philosophy, and the mysteries of the universe. Marsilio Ficino, a brilliant scholar, sponsored by Cosimo, was the central figure of this academy. He translated Plato's complete works into Latin, making them accessible to Western Europe after centuries. These discussions at Careggi profoundly influenced Renaissance thought, art, and literature, shaping the very intellectual landscape of the era. Lorenzo, the Magnificent, Cosimo's grandson, continued the tradition of intellectual gatherings at Careggi. He loved the villa deeply, often retreating there to compose poetry, reflect, and meet with his inner circle of thinkers and artists. Careggi became a true haven for him, a place where he could escape the political pressures of Florence and indulge his artistic and intellectual passions. He hosted elaborate parties, but also intimate discussions late into the night, fueled by wine and brilliant ideas. The villa was a hub of creativity, where new artistic styles were discussed and philosophical concepts were debated. It was the perfect backdrop for Lorenzo's reputation as a patron of the arts and a lover of wisdom. However, Careggi also witnessed moments of profound sorrow and secrets. It was the site of several significant deaths within the Medici family, deaths that shaped the course of Florentine history and often left lingering questions. And Cosimo the Elder, the patriarch who built much of the Medici Empire, passed away at Careggi in 1464. His death marked the end of an era, and his final days in the tranquil villa were a period of reflection and preparing his family for the challenges ahead. Piero the Gouty, Cosimo's son, and Lorenzo's father, also died at Careggi in 1469. His passing, after a long struggle with illness, brought Lorenzo to power at a very young age. But the most poignant and perhaps most secretive death at Careggi was that of Lorenzo the Magnificent himself. Lorenzo had been suffering from various ailments for years, including a form of gout that afflicted many Medici men. By the spring of 1492, his health was failing rapidly. He retreated to Careggi, seeking comfort and perhaps a cure in its quiet, restorative atmosphere. However, his condition worsened. He was attended by some of the most prominent doctors of his time, including the Jewish physician Lazzaro da Viterbo. These doctors tried various treatments, some of which seem bizarre to us today, including concoctions made from ground pearls and other exotic ingredients. Despite their efforts, Lorenzo continued to decline. The atmosphere at Careggi during Lorenzo's final days was thick with tension and sorrow. His closest friends and family gathered around him. The brilliant minds of the Platonic Academy, like Marsilio Ficino, were also present, offering comfort and philosophical solace. But there were also whispers and hushed conversations. The succession was uncertain. Lorenzo's eldest son, Piero, was not seen as having his father's political genius or charisma. The future of Florence, and indeed the future of the Medici family, hung precariously in the balance. As Lorenzo lay dying, he received last rites from the firebrand Dominican friar Girolamo Savonarola. Savonarola, a severe critic of Medici decadence, reportedly demanded that Lorenzo renounce his worldly possessions and restore liberty to Florence. What exactly was said in that final conversation in the quiet chamber of Careggi remains a subject of historical debate and speculation. Some accounts say Lorenzo accepted, others that he refused the friar's demands. Lorenzo the Magnificent died at Careggi on April 8, 1492. His death plunged Florence into mourning and created a void that no one could fill. The intellectual heart of the Renaissance, which had pulsed so strongly within the walls of Careggi, seemed to dim. The villa, which had been a symbol of enlightened thought and artistic flourishing, now carried the heavy memory of a beloved leader's last breath. The secrets of his final words, the true nature of his conversations with Savonarola, and the exact circumstances of his passing are still debated by historians. Careggi stands as a beautiful, yet melancholic monument to the end of a golden age for the Medici, forever linked to the passing of their greatest leader and the unresolved questions of his final moments. Number 6, Villa di Poggio a Caiano and the Poison Banquets. The Villa di Poggio a Caiano sits majestically in the Tuscan countryside, a short journey from Florence. This villa marks a significant shift in Medici power and artistic ambition. It was commissioned by Lorenzo the Magnificent himself, not as a fortress-like retreat, but as a pure pleasure villa, a place of beauty, art, and grand entertaining. Giuliano da Sangallo, a brilliant architect of the early Renaissance, designed it. Poggio a Caiano is famous for its harmonious proportions, its graceful portico with a loggia on the upper floor, and its innovative central hall, which was a departure from traditional palace designs. It was built to impress, to show off the Medici's refined taste and their deep understanding of classical architecture. Lorenzo intended Poggio a Caiano to be a country escape, where he could host lavish parties, hunt, and enjoy the company of his intellectual circle. He personally oversaw much of its construction, envisioning it as a perfect blend of a working farm and a luxurious residence. The villa was surrounded by extensive gardens, orchards, and vineyards, producing goods that contributed to the Medici's wealth. It also served as a stage for magnificent events, showcasing the family's power and influence. After Lorenzo's death, his son Giovanni, who later became Pope Leo X, continued the work on the villa, commissioning famous artists like Pontormo and Andrea del Sarto to decorate its grand salon with frescoes celebrating Medici glories. These frescoes, depicting Roman scenes that subtly hinted at Medici triumphs, were meant to project an image of timeless power. However, beneath the villa's outward splendor and artistic beauty, Poggio a Caiano harbors a much darker, more sinister set of stories involving sudden deaths and whispered accusations of poisoning. This villa became notorious during the reign of Francesco I de' Medici, who became Grand Duke of Tuscany in 1574. Francesco was a complex and often secretive ruler. He was interested in science, alchemy, and metallurgy, spending much of his time in his laboratories rather than engaging in public life. His personal life was also complicated. He was married to Joanna of Austria, a rather melancholic Habsburg princess, but he was deeply in love with his Venetian mistress, Bianca Capello. Their affair was a scandal that openly defied social norms and caused much tension within the Medici court and beyond. The relationship between Francesco and Bianca was a true Renaissance drama. Bianca was beautiful, ambitious, and highly intelligent. She had run away from Venice with her first husband and settled in Florence, where she caught Francesco's eye. After Joanna of Austria died in 1578, under circumstances that were sometimes questioned, Francesco secretly married Bianca. He later made her Grand Duchess, a move that was deeply unpopular with many, especially his younger brother, Cardinal Ferdinando de' Medici. And Ferdinando detested Bianca, seeing her as an opportunistic intruder who had corrupted his brother and alienated him from the family. He often clashed with Francesco over state affairs and personal matters. The tension between Francesco, Bianca, and Ferdinando reached its peak in October 1587, where Francesco and Bianca were staying at Poggio a Caiano, and Ferdinando joined them for a hunting trip. The brothers had been trying to reconcile, and the visit was supposed to be a step towards mending their strained relationship. On October 8th, they all had dinner together at the villa. The next day, both Francesco and Bianca fell ill. Their symptoms were severe high fevers, intense vomiting, and abdominal pain. Within days, both of them were dead. Francesco died on October 19th, and Bianca followed him on October 20th. The sudden and almost simultaneous deaths of the Grand Duke and Grand Duchess immediately sparked rumors of poisoning. The speed of their decline, combined with the bitter rivalry between Ferdinando and Bianca, made many people suspect foul play. Who would benefit most from their deaths? Ferdinando, of course. He inherited the Grand Duchy, becoming Ferdinando I de' Medici, a strong and capable ruler who would go on to restore much of the Medici family's standing. The official cause of death was malaria, a common illness in Tuscany at the time. However, many contemporary accounts and subsequent historical investigations have cast doubt on this explanation. Malaria typically has a more gradual onset, and the symptoms described were also consistent with arsenic poisoning. Ferdinando quickly took control. He ordered autopsies, but the results were vague, and suspicion continued to swirl. Bianca's body was hastily buried in unconsecrated ground, a clear sign of Ferdinando's contempt for her. Francesco was given a proper burial in the family crypt, but the shadow of suspicion never left his death. For centuries, historians debated whether Ferdinando had orchestrated the poisoning of his brother and sister-in-law to seize power. Forensic analysis of the remains of Francesco and Bianca conducted in the early 21st century seemed to support the poisoning theory, finding traces of arsenic in their tissues. However, later studies have suggested that the arsenic could have been from medicinal treatments popular at the time. The definitive answer remains elusive, lost in the sands of time. The Poggio a Caiano, therefore, stands as a grand and beautiful villa, a monument to Renaissance art and architecture, but also a silent witness to one of the most famous and chilling mysteries in Medici history. Its elegant rooms and serene gardens once hosted lavish banquets, but also saw the agonizing final days of a Grand Duke and his beloved Grand Duchess. The villa forever holds the secrets of their sudden demise, a haunting reminder of the brutal power struggles and hidden dangers that even the most powerful families faced in Renaissance Italy. The whispers of poison still seem to linger in the Tuscan air around its stately walls. Number 5. Villa di Castello and the Lost Gardens of Delight. Just a short distance from Florence, the Villa di Castello emerges as a jewel of the Medici's artistic patronage. This villa was purchased by the Medici family in the early 15th century, but it was Cosimo, the first de Medici, the first Grand Duke of Tuscany, who truly transformed it into a masterpiece of Renaissance garden design. Cosimo, a powerful and ambitious ruler, saw the villa not just as a residence but as a stage for his power and prestige. He commissioned Niccolo Trebbio, a brilliant landscape architect, to create a garden that would rival any in Europe. The result was a revolutionary design considered one of the earliest and most influential examples of the Italian Renaissance garden. The Castello was intended to showcase Cosimo's vision of a harmonious universe, a place where nature was carefully sculpted to reflect order and beauty. The garden was meticulously planned with complex hydraulic systems to power elaborate fountains, grottos, and water features. It was filled with rare plants, citrus trees, and ancient statues, many of which are now housed in museums. The centerpiece of the garden was the famous Fountain of Hercules and Antaeus by Bartolomeo Ammanati, a powerful sculpture that symbolized Cosimo's triumph over his enemies. Another incredible feature was the Grotto of Animals, a fantastical cave filled with mechanized animal statues that would squirt water, astonishing visitors. This grotto, designed to mimic a natural cave, was a marvel of Renaissance engineering and artistic ingenuity. The villa itself was beautifully decorated, providing a luxurious backdrop to the spectacular gardens. Artists like Pontormo and Bronzino contributed frescoes to the villa's interiors, depicting scenes from classical mythology and celebrating the Medici family's virtues. Castello was a place for relaxation, hunting, and grand receptions. Cosimo I and his formidable wife, Eleonora of Toledo, spent considerable time here, entertaining foreign dignitaries and consolidating their power. The garden was a place for both private contemplation and public display, designed to impress anyone who visited with the wealth, taste, and power of the Grand Duke. However, behind the beauty and grandeur, Villa di Castello holds a sadder, more hidden story, the tale of its lost gardens. Over the centuries, elements of this groundbreaking Renaissance garden have been altered, neglected, or completely destroyed. While parts of Trebbio's original design are still visible, much of what made it so revolutionary and magnificent is gone. The complex water systems that once powered the dazzling fountains suffered from lack of maintenance. Many of the original statues were moved to other Medici villas or museums, leaving empty pedestals and changing the intended visual narratives of the garden. The rare plants and exotic species that once thrived here were replaced or allowed to perish. One of the most poignant losses is the true essence of the garden as a living, evolving work of art. The meticulously curated collection of citrus trees, which were a source of great pride for the Medici, suffered through various periods of neglect. These trees were not just ornamental, they represented the Medici's connection to trade and their ability to cultivate exotic luxuries. The garden's narrative, which was carefully crafted to tell a story about Cosimo's rule and his connection to classical ideals, has been fractured. Visitors today can still admire its beauty and grandeur, but they are only seeing a shadow of its former glory. Another hidden story concerns the lives of the people who created and maintained this extraordinary garden. The sheer scale of the project required an army of gardeners, engineers, and artists. Their labor, their ingenuity, and their dedication went into making Cosimo's vision a reality. While their names are largely forgotten, their sweat and skill shaped the landscapes we see today. The complex hydraulic systems, for instance, were a marvel of engineering for their time, requiring deep knowledge of water flow and pressure. The construction of the grottos, with their intricate shell decorations and hidden mechanisms, demanded incredible artistic and technical skill. These people who toiled unseen were just as vital to the garden's creation as the famous architects and sculptors. Castello also witnessed the joys and sorrows of Cosimo's large family. His children grew up playing in these magnificent gardens, their laughter echoing among the citrus trees. His wife Eleonora would have strolled through its paths, perhaps finding a moment of peace amidst her many duties. But the garden also saw their tragedies. Cosimo lost several of his children at young ages, and Eleonora herself died prematurely, possibly from malaria. These personal sorrows would have unfolded against the backdrop of this outwardly perfect paradise, a stark contrast between external beauty and internal grief. Today, the Villa di Castello remains a property of the state of Italy and houses the Accademia della Crusca, a prestigious institution dedicated to the Italian language. Its garden, while still beautiful and historically significant, carries the weight of what has been lost. It is a haunting reminder that even the grandest artistic creations can fade or change over time. The whispers of the past tell us that the gardens of Castello were once even more spectacular, filled with a magic that can now only be imagined. The true stories of its creation, its purpose, and its eventual decline are etched into the very soil and stones of this remarkable Medici estate. Number 4. Villa La Petraia and the Secret Love Affair. Perched on a hillside overlooking Florence, the Villa La Petraia is a testament to the Medici's enduring power and their love for beauty. This villa started as a medieval castle acquired by the Medici in the mid-16th century. It was Ferdinando I de' Medici, the Grand Duke, who succeeded his brother Francesco, who truly transformed Petraia into a grand country residence. Ferdinando, a shrewd and capable ruler, invested heavily in improving the villa and its surrounding gardens. He enlisted the architect Buontalenti, a genius of Renaissance design, to remodel the castle into a more comfortable and elegant villa. The defensive walls were mostly taken down, and the central courtyard was covered to create a magnificent ballroom. And Petraia's most striking feature is its beautiful terraced gardens, which cascade down the hillside. These gardens were designed to be both functional and aesthetically pleasing, with fountains, statues, and exotic plants. The most famous fountain is the Fountain of Florence, topped with a bronze statue of Venus by Giambologna, which was originally in the Villa di Castello. It was moved to Petraia by Ferdinando, adding to the villa's artistic prestige. The villa's interiors are also remarkable, especially the grand central courtyard, which was enclosed with a glass roof in the 19th century and decorated with magnificent frescoes by Cosimo Dadi, depicting the deeds of the Medici family. These frescoes served as a powerful visual narrative of the family's history and their glorious achievements. Petraia was a favored residence for many Medici Grand Dukes and their families. It offered splendid views of Florence and the surrounding countryside, a refreshing escape from the heat and politics of the city. It was a place for grand parties, hunting expeditions, and leisurely strolls through the meticulously maintained gardens. The villa served as a stage for demonstrating the Medici's power and wealth, hosting important visitors, and celebrating dynastic events. It was seen as a place of leisure and pleasure, far from the serious business of state. However, Petraia also holds the whispers of a passionate and ultimately tragic secret love affair that unfolded within its walls. This hidden story involves Cardinal Leopoldo de' Medici, one of the later, less famous but highly influential members of the Medici family. Leopoldo was the youngest son of Cosimo II de' Medici and Maria Maddalena of Austria. Born in 1617, he was destined for a life in the church and became a cardinal in 1667. But Leopoldo was no ordinary cardinal. He was a brilliant intellectual, a passionate collector of art and books, and a patron of science. He founded the Accademia del Cimento, one of Europe's first scientific societies, and corresponded with leading thinkers of his time, including Galileo Galilei. He amassed an astonishing collection of paintings, sculptures, and scientific instruments, which later formed the core of the Uffizi Gallery's collection. Despite his ecclesiastical vows, or perhaps because of the rigid expectations placed upon him, Leopoldo harbored a secret. He fell deeply in love with a woman of noble birth, but not one he could openly marry, given his cardinalate. While the exact details of this affair are shrouded in secrecy and only hinted at in historical records, it is believed that Leopoldo conducted a long and intense relationship with a Florentine noblewoman. These affairs were not uncommon among high-ranking churchmen in the Renaissance, but they were kept meticulously secret to avoid scandal and protect the family's reputation. Petrea, with its secluded location and numerous private rooms, became a favored meeting place for Leopoldo and his secret love. Away from the watchful eyes of the Florentine court and the strictures of the church, they could meet in relative peace. The villa's quiet gardens would have provided a perfect setting for their clandestine rendezvous. Imagine hushed conversations under the shade of ancient trees, stolen moments in secluded grottos, or quiet dinners in private chambers. The beauty and tranquility of Petrea would have offered a temporary sanctuary for their forbidden love. The affair, however, was not without its burdens. The constant need for secrecy, the fear of discovery, and the impossibility of a legitimate union would have cast a shadow over their relationship. Leopoldo, despite his intellectual prowess and position, would have been bound by the strict rules of the church and the expectations of his powerful family. His lover would have lived under the threat of public shame and ruin if their secret was revealed. Their story is one of longing and sacrifice, a private drama played out against the opulent backdrop of Medici power. Eventually the affair ended, likely due to the practical impossibility of its continuation or the sheer emotional toll of secrecy. Some sources hint that Leopoldo's lover died before him, adding another layer of tragedy to their story. Leopoldo himself died in 1675, leaving behind an incredible legacy as a patron of arts and sciences, but also the lingering whisper of a heart broken by a love he could never openly claim. The secrets of his personal life were buried deep, reflecting the strict social codes of the time and the compromises powerful individuals had to make. Today, Petrea is owned by the Italian state and is open to the public. Visitors can admire its stunning architecture, its beautiful gardens, and the magnificent frescoes that celebrate Medici glory. But as you walk through its halls and gardens, you might sense the lingering echoes of a hidden romance, a forbidden love that blossomed in secret, far from the public eye. Petrea, with its quiet elegance, holds the memory of a private passion, a testament to the fact that even within the most powerful families, human desires and emotions found a way to manifest, sometimes in the most unexpected and secretive ways. Number 3. Villa di Pratolino and the giant's mysterious demise. North of Florence, nestled among the Apennine foothills, lies the vast estate of Pratolino. This villa, now known as Parco Mediceo di Pratolino, was perhaps the most extravagant and ambitious of all Medici creations. It was commissioned by Francesco I de' Medici, the Grand Duke, who was also an alchemist and lover of Bianca Capello. Francesco poured immense resources into Pratolino, aiming to create a fantastical pleasure garden that would outshine all others. He employed the brilliant and eccentric architect Bernardo Buontalenti to bring his vision to life. The villa itself was luxurious, but the true marvel was the garden. Pratolino's gardens were a triumph of Renaissance engineering and artistic imagination. They were filled with an astounding array of grottos, water features, automata, and mechanical wonders. There were elaborate fountains that played music, statues that moved, and secret jets of water designed to playfully drench unsuspecting guests. One of the most famous features was the Grotto of Cupid, with its intricate shell decorations and hidden mechanisms. Another highlight was the water organ, an early form of a musical instrument powered by water pressure. The gardens were a place of endless amusement and wonder, designed to both entertain and astonish visitors with the Grand Duke's ingenuity and wealth. However, the undisputed star of Pratolino's garden was the Colossus of the Apennine, a colossal stone sculpture by Giambologna. This immense, crouching figure, over 10 meters tall, personifies the Apennine Mountains. It was built partly of rock and partly of stucco, with a hollow interior that once housed a grotto and a water fountain. The Colossus was not just a statue, it was a functioning grotto with water dripping from its beard to form a pond, and mechanisms that would make it weep or sneeze. It was a staggering feat of art and engineering, a powerful symbol of nature tamed by human skill, and a testament to Francesco's artistic and scientific curiosity. But behind the grandeur and the playful wonders, Pratolino holds a hidden story of the Colossus itself, a tale of its mysterious decline and the secrets of its inner workings. The Colossus of the Apennine, despite its grandeur, has suffered significantly over the centuries. Its complex internal mechanisms, which once made it seem alive, have largely ceased to function. The grotto inside, originally a cool and hidden space, has deteriorated. The water features that once made it weep or sneeze are mostly gone. The giant, once a vibrant and interactive part of the garden, has become a silent, weather-beaten sentinel, a shadow of its former self. The exact reasons for the Colossus's mysterious demise are not entirely clear. It was a victim of neglect, changes in taste, and the sheer difficulty of maintaining such a complex and intricate structure. The later Medici rulers and subsequent owners of the estate did not always share Francesco's passion for mechanical wonders or his dedication to maintaining them. Over time, the intricate plumbing systems clogged, the moving parts seized up, and the delicate stucco work crumbled. The loss of these functionalities meant that the giant no longer performed its intended wonders, becoming a static, imposing monument rather than a living, breathing part of the garden experience. Another hidden aspect concerns the people who built this massive sculpture and the secrets of its construction. Giambologna, the master sculptor, would have overseen a vast team of stonemasons, engineers, and laborers. The logistics of building such a colossal figure, integrating water systems within its very structure, and ensuring its stability were immense. How did they lift and place such massive stones? What techniques did they use to create its hollow interior and intricate mechanisms? These were closely guarded secrets of the Renaissance workshops passed down from master to apprentice. The knowledge of how to make a giant weep or sigh, how to create lifelike automata powered by water, was a testament to the advanced engineering skills of the time. The villa itself also holds secrets, having been largely demolished in the early 19th century by its new owners, the Demidov family, who replaced it with a more modest residence. This act of demolition, though common at the time to replace old structures with new ones, meant that much of Francesco's original villa was lost, adding another layer of vanished grandeur to Pratolino's history. The gardens, though still vast and beautiful, are only a fragment of their original, dazzling complexity. The playful spirit and interactive nature of the original design have largely disappeared. Today, Pratolino is a public park and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Visitors can still marvel at the sheer scale of the Colossus, even if it no longer performs its watery tricks. Its imposing presence, sitting majestically by the lake, is a powerful reminder of the Medici's ambition and the extraordinary creativity of the Renaissance. But as you stand before the silent giant, you might hear the whispers of its former glory, the sounds of cascading water, and the distant music of a water organ. You might wonder about the hands that built it, and the secrets of its mechanical heart, now largely lost to time. The Colossus of the Apennine stands as a silent sentinel, bearing the weight of its own mysterious decline and the vanished magic of Pratolino. Number 2, Villa di Artemino and the Grand Duke's Unfinished Dream. Perched on a strategic hilltop in the Montalbano region, the Villa di Artemino, often called La Ferdinanda or the Villa of the Hundred Chimneys, is one of the most distinctive Medici villas. It was built for Ferdinando I de' Medici, the Grand Duke, who arguably brought the Medici family to the peak of its power and influence. Commissioned in 1596 and designed by the brilliant architect Bernardo Buontalenti, Artemino was conceived as a grand hunting lodge, a place where the Grand Duke could entertain in style and indulge his passion for the hunt. Its unique architectural feature, the numerous chimneys that pierce its roofline, gives it an almost whimsical appearance and its popular nickname. Artemino's design is a striking blend of Renaissance elegance and functional grandeur. The villa stands on a flat terrace, offering breathtaking panoramic views of the surrounding Tuscan countryside. Its interior was designed for comfort and ceremony, with spacious halls, private apartments, and even a chapel. The frescoes that once adorned its walls depicted hunting scenes and classical motifs, reflecting its purpose as a royal hunting retreat. The surrounding estate was vast, encompassing forests teeming with game, and was carefully managed to provide the Grand Duke with the best hunting grounds. Artemino was a place where royalty could escape the formal court of Florence and enjoy the rugged beauty of the countryside, albeit in the utmost luxury. Ferdinando I often used Artemino for grand hunting parties, inviting nobles from across Europe. These events were not just about sport, they were important diplomatic occasions, opportunities for Ferdinando to forge alliances, conduct secret negotiations, and display the wealth and power of the Grand Duchy of Tuscany. The villa's grand dining halls would have hosted lavish banquets, and its grounds would have bustled with horses, hounds, and courtiers in hunting attire. It was a vibrant hub of aristocratic life, a place where important decisions were made under the guise of leisure. However, despite its impressive scale and design, Artemino holds a hidden story of an unfinished dream and a legacy that never quite reached its full potential. While Buontalenti designed the villa, and construction proceeded quickly, Ferdinando I died in 1609, just a few years after the villa was completed. His death meant that much of his grand vision for Artemino was never fully realized. The villa was intended to be the center of an even larger, more elaborate estate, with extensive gardens and additional structures that would have further enhanced its grandeur and functionality. These plans, meticulously drawn by Buontalenti, were largely set aside after Ferdinando's passing. His successor, Cosimo II de' Medici, while appreciating Artemino, did not share his father's intense passion for hunting or his specific vision for the estate. Cosimo II was more interested in science and the arts, and while he did use the villa, he did not invest in its further development in the same way Ferdinando had intended. As a result, Artemino, magnificent as it is, remains somewhat isolated, a jewel in the wilderness that never quite became the sprawling complex that Ferdinando had dreamed of. The grand plans for water features, elaborate grottos, and extensive pleasure gardens, which were so common in other Medici villas, were never fully implemented at Artemino. It remained primarily a hunting lodge rather than a multi-faceted royal retreat. Another secret involves the specific architectural choice of 100 chimneys. While providing necessary ventilation and heating for such a large structure, the sheer number of visible chimneys is unusual. Some speculate that it was a deliberate visual statement, a whimsical touch by Buontalenti or Ferdinando to give the villa a distinctive, almost fantastical silhouette against the sky. It was a subtle display of architectural daring, setting Artemino apart from other villas of its time. The story of its peculiar design often gets lost in the overall grandeur, but it hints at a playful and individualistic spirit behind its creation. Artemino also stands as a silent witness to the end of the Medici family's most dynamic period. After Ferdinando I, the Medici line slowly began to decline. While they continued to rule for over a century, their power and influence gradually waned. Artemino, built at the very height of their power, serves as a poignant reminder of that golden age and the ambitions of its last great Grand Duke. The villa continued to be used by the later Medici, but the lavishness and strategic importance of its initial years faded. Today, the Villa di Artemino is privately owned and often used for events, conferences, and as a luxury hotel. Its pristine state and stunning location make it a popular destination. As you gaze upon its distinctive silhouette with its many chimneys against the Tuscan sky, you might reflect on Ferdinando I's unfinished dream. The villa stands as a testament to his ambition and the brilliance of Buontalenti, but also carries the subtle sadness of potential unfulfilled, a grand vision that was never quite fully brought to life, leaving a whisper of what might have been. Number 1. Villa di Cerreto Guidi and the bride's fatal fall. The Villa di Cerreto Guidi stands in a strategic position near the Fusecchio Marsh west of Florence. This impressive Medici villa was built by Cosimo I de' Medici, the first Grand Duke, in the mid-16th century. It was designed by the architect Bernardo Buontalenti, the same genius behind many other Medici projects. The Cerreto Guidi is distinct from many other Medici villas because it retains a more fortified, castle-like appearance, even though it was built during a time of relative peace. Its most striking feature is its two grand, symmetrical ramps or staircases that lead up to the main entrance, creating a dramatic approach to the villa. Cosimo I intended Cerreto Guidi to be a practical hunting lodge and a base for agricultural activities in the surrounding fertile lands. The marshlands nearby were rich in game, making it an ideal location for hunting expeditions. The villa also served as an administrative center for the vast Medici estates in the area. Its robust design with strong walls and a somewhat austere appearance reflected its practical purpose rather than purely aesthetic indulgence. Yet, it still had elegant interiors and spacious rooms to accommodate the Grand Duke and his large retinue during their stays. The villa saw many Medici family members pass through its halls, used for everything from administrative tasks to royal hunts. It was a functional and important part of the Medici network of villas, connecting their urban power base with their rural economic interests. It also served as a convenient stopover point for traveling dignitaries and family members journeying between Florence and other parts of Tuscany. However, Cerreto Guidi is forever linked to one of the most shocking and enduring mysteries of the Medici family, the sudden and suspicious death of Isabella de' Medici. Isabella, born in 1542, was the beloved daughter of Cosimo I and Eleonora of Toledo. She was renowned for her beauty, intelligence, and vibrant personality. Unlike many aristocratic women of her time, she was highly educated, a talented musician, and a patron of the arts. She was known for her independent spirit and charm, making her a favorite at court. In 1558, Isabella was married to Paolo Giordano Orsini, Duke of Bracciano, a powerful and often ruthless Roman nobleman. The marriage was arranged for political reasons to strengthen ties between the Medici and the Orsini family. However, Isabella remained largely in Florence, often residing at the Medici court, while her husband spent much of his time in Rome, engaged in his own affairs. This arrangement was not uncommon for the time, but it meant Isabella enjoyed a remarkable degree of freedom compared to other married noblewomen. She held her own court, hosted lavish gatherings, and surrounded herself with artists, musicians, and intellectuals. Isabella's life at court was glamorous, but also dangerous. There were whispers about her independent nature and possibly her private affairs. She was an attractive and powerful woman in a world dominated by men. The most persistent rumor was that she had a secret lover, Troilo Orsini, her husband's cousin. Whether this was true or merely court gossip, it fueled suspicion and jealousy. On July 16, 1576, Isabella de' Medici died suddenly at the Villa di Cerreto Guidi. The official story provided by the Medici family was that she had died of a sudden illness, collapsing while washing her hair. However, this explanation was widely disbelieved at the time and has been questioned by historians ever since. The circumstances of her death were highly suspicious. Her husband, Paolo Giordano Orsini, was present at the villa, which was unusual as he typically spent little time there. Her death occurred very shortly after that of her cousin Leonora de' Medici, who also died mysteriously at her husband's villa, possibly by strangulation at around the same time. Both women were accused of infidelity. The most widely accepted theory, based on contemporary letters and later historical accounts, is that Isabella was murdered by her husband, Paolo Giordano Orsini, with the probable knowledge and tacit approval of her brother, Grand Duke Francesco I. It is believed that Orsini strangled her, possibly to punish her for alleged infidelity and to salvage his honor. Francesco I, who was consolidating his power and facing his own marital scandals, might have found it convenient to allow his brother-in-law to deal with a perceived threat to family honor in a discreet, brutal manner, rather than risking public scandal and the loss of a valuable political alliance. The villa's isolated location and the family's iron grip on information allowed the true story to be suppressed. The death of Isabella at Cerreto Guidi remains one of the darkest chapters in Medici history, a chilling reminder of the brutal realities of power, honor, and gender in the Renaissance. The villa, with its stately ramps and strong walls, became the silent witness to a shocking act of violence against one of the most beloved and vibrant Medici women. The official narrative was a flimsy cover-up, and the truth was buried deep within the villa's past. Today, the Villa di Cerreto Guidi is a state museum housing a collection of hunting weapons. Visitors can walk up its dramatic ramps and explore its rooms, which now display historical artifacts. But as you stand in its grand halls or gaze from its windows across the tranquil landscape, you might feel a chill. You might imagine the elegant, independent Isabella de' Medici, vibrant and full of life, spending her last moments within these very walls. The villa forever holds the secret of her final, fatal fall, a haunting story of betrayal and the ruthless pursuit of honor that stained the opulent world of the Medici.